Today's episode is brought to you by the CU Daily.
Welcome to the CU DailyCast. I'm Walt Lascos. Today, the CU DailyCast debuts a new series of interviews that call attention to the credit union's corner office. The series will feature informal conversations with CEOs sharing their thoughts on what they've learned during their career, which can then be of help to you in your career. And to help us kick off this special series of interviews is a friend who recently announced his plans to retire by January 2026, Stephen White. With more than 45 years of experience in the credit union industry, Steve has spent the last 25 years as president and CEO of Westerly Community Credit Union in Westerly, Rhode Island. Steve, welcome to the CU DailyCast.
Walter, it's nice to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
So, Steve, talk to us about the start of your career journey and how it brought you to credit unions and eventually the corner office at Westerly Community Credit Union.
Well, this is kind of a story I've told on more than one occasion. My career started with a handshake. Actually, I was bussing tables at a Howard Johnson's. I don't know how many people remember Howard Johnson's restaurants. And at the time, the president and CEO of People's Credit in Middletown, Rhode Island, was there after a board meeting with some of his directors, and I happened to know him through my father, and I just went over and shook his hand, said, "Hey, Mr. Rick, how you doing? Nice to see you." And he introduced me to his board members, and I walked away, and they had asked the question, "Well, who's that?" And they goes, "Well, that's George Whiteside." And, well, it's a very polite young man, offer him a job. And really, I was gearing up to go to college, and that handshake got me into a teller's position at People's Credit Union. And, I had the choice of cleaning up tables or, working with pretty women and wearing nice clothes at work. It was an easy choice. So I decided to give up washing dishes and go work for the credit union. And that's kind of how it all gets started.
So, Steve, is this a situation where you suddenly moved into the credit union world and started really as a teller? So you really probably got the whole scope of the gamut of the experience of the credit union operations too, starting out as a teller.
Yes, I did actually. I worked in a lot of areas of the credit union over my time. Part of it was I was going to college. It was my summer job. It was on weekends when I was available. And as time went on, I guess I was doing well. More and more experience came my way. Went from the teller side to the operation side to the IT side. I had a skill set to code. Actually, I used to do some development on the programming side for a while too. Wound up managing the IT group over there, and it just seemed like every year progressively, I gained more experience in different parts of the organization to the point where, from there, I started managing the retail group and eventually worked my way up to chief operating officer, where pretty much the majority of the organization reported to me over time. So it was incrementally, but in that entire process of working in a branch, working in IT, working with retail, working on the deposit side, I got a really good rounded understanding of the business. And that's kind of really how my progression worked through the years there. It was just something that, each year, for whatever reason, while I was going to school, I was just gaining more and more experience, and I was moving up the ranks just by working hard more than anything else, I think.
So that really sounds like, the more exposure you could have to different aspects of the credit union operations, the more it helps to prepare you to advance in your career within the credit union. And I would also say then, when it comes to the CEO position, when did that kind of start to come to mind? Like, was this something from the early stages that I'm going to be a CEO, or did that kind of reveal itself over time?
No, I wouldn't say in the early stages that was it. Once again, originally, I didn't know what I wanted to do with my life. Like most people, I'm going to college and business school, and I'm working my way through. And, it just kind of over time, as I was giving more and more responsibility, I started thinking, hey, I can do this. Or there are things I'd like to implement differently because I think they would work better. And eventually got to the point where it's all right. You've got all these great ideas. You think they'll work better. You think it'll work out well. At some point in time, you got to put up, and say, okay, I really think I can do this. And I think I can do it better. I got to take that leap. I wasn't going to get the job there. The CEO ahead of me was only about 4 or 5 years older than I was at the time as chief operating officer. So it was time to move on. And when the job became available in Westerly, it was a smaller institution. I'd gone from a $200 million institution to an $80 million institution. I go, well, here's my opportunity to basically say, I've had my thoughts. This is the way I think things should go. All right, let me put my money where my mouth is and see if I can make it work.
If we were to look at your style of management, how would you describe it? And I guess I'm talking here about when you're working with staff and your views of management. Have they changed? Is it managing people, or is it inspiring people or motivating people?
You know what? I think it has changed over time. I mean, when a smaller institution, it was managing people. And as the institution begins to grow and you start trusting people to take on some of the responsibilities you're always concerned about, you start working into the inspiration mode or setting a vision for people on that end of it. It's not, it evolves over time. I guess part of it has to do with the size of the institution you're into and what is needed at that particular point in time. I came up in the environment where, I was in that you were lucky to have a job, and as long as the boss wasn't asking you to do anything that was illegal or immoral, you did it. All right. And that's just kind of the way it was. And, maybe you got the reason why, or maybe you didn't, but in the end, they were paying you to do a job, and that's how it turned out. But, times have changed. People want to know the whys. They want to be more collaborative. And I think my style has changed to be much more collaborative than it was in the beginning. But once again, I think part of that just comes from the evolution of the institution. I've gone from small to medium size relatively, and it's been part of that whole process. So it's kind of an evolving thing over the years, I would believe. Right now, it's more, I'm in the collaborative vision setting mode of here's where we want to be, here's where we want to get to. You guys work out the details, and I promise you we'll get there. Those types of things.
Steve, as a CEO, what have you learned over the years about driving asset growth at the credit union, and has that evolved over time?
Yes, and it's interesting because asset growth, you need it without a doubt. Well, my belief is that you have to grow as a financial institution. Your overhead grows every year, so you have to grow every year just to overcome the increase in your overhead. And it's how aggressively do you grow? I'm kind of an incrementalist, so it's I like to grow at a reasonable pace. Part of the issue is once again you have to protect your net worth and your capital. So it's in a fairly controlled manner, although sometimes it doesn't always work out that way. Sometimes you grow faster than you want. Sometimes you grow a little slower than you want. But on average, it's on an incremental pace and a nice steady method on that end. Times have changed. We used to, people used to come in every, Thursdays and Fridays with their deposits and their checks in their hand. I still remember that in those days. And, now it's deposits are coming electronically, or, withdrawals are happening electronically. It's a much different environment at this particular point in time. Money moves a lot faster now than it used to in the past, that's for sure. And, trying to manage that it's complex, but that's part of the fun part of the job. It's, hey, we need assets now, let's grow them. We don't need them as much here. How do we do that without offending our membership? If you're growing loans at a certain rate and all of a sudden you want to slow that down, at what rates are you willing to raise them? So you do slow down that growth, but you're also not offending your membership, because that's the other part of the issue here too. We're here to help our members and give them ideally a fair or best deal that we can. So it's a balancing act.
When you look back at the list of achievements associated with your tenure as CEO, what would you consider to be your biggest win, your biggest achievement?
You know what? That's an interesting question, because I am an incrementalist. So it's I would say, 25 years, been able to grow the credit union from a little over 80 million to just over 500 million as of the May balance sheet. And but as an incrementalist, I can't particularly think of any great single achievement that's part of it. I can tell you from my perspective, I think some of the best work I and my team have done is when things have been at their worst. So I think, a lot of leadership it's easy to be a leader when things are going really well. It's harder when things aren't going so well. Take the financial crisis and the mortgage meltdown from back in 2008, 2009. That was a very tough time in the financial services industry. And you kind of got to be that person to basically let everyone know things are going to be all right. And they have to have enough confidence in your abilities to believe that. And if I would say I had a biggest achievement, it would be getting through the rough times as well as we did.
Very interesting. What would you point to as being that strength or one thing in your life that helped you the most to inspire your team to achieve success, and maybe particularly during those tough times?
Well, if I had to say one thing, stick-to-itiveness. Sometimes it's a fault, but I'm not one to give up on something I believe in very quickly. It could be a program, could be a product, could be whatever it is. Sometimes they take off very quickly. Sometimes they take off very slowly, but eventually you get the result you want because, you stick with it, you tinker with it, you keep working with it. You set a vision, and there's a stick-to-itiveness to that vision to try to get to a certain point in a certain place. Now, I would say my greatest strength is stick-to-itiveness. And communication, in that I tend to over communicate my vision sometimes, where a lot of people around here will be able to repeat it to you, verse and chapter, because I'm always spouting it out. But stick-to-itiveness, I think, would be one of those things. And I do believe I have pretty good vision as far as where I think things are heading and where the industry is heading on some of those items. I believe so. And I think those two things probably. But if I had to say one is stick-to-itiveness, actually sometimes to a fault. Sometimes you do got to let positions go a little sooner rather than later. I've got some good team members who will remind me about that.
Steve, we talk about challenging times and that sort of thing. What would you say was the most challenging aspect you experienced while being a CEO?
It's taking a diverse group of people and trying to get them all on the same page, going for a common goal. I would think easily managing people, it's hard. I mean, people come with a lot of different points of view and from a lot of different areas, and trying to get them to buy into a vision or into a goal and getting them all on the same page and getting them all working basically together with their skills to get there, I think for me has probably been the most challenging part.
Yep, I can see how that would be, because when you think of it, you're in a position where, like you say, you really communicate a lot, but you also have to inspire and you also have to motivate. And it's you're the forerunner with the flag, and you need people to follow you. It's like the general leading the team into battle. It's people have to be passionate about you to follow you, and it is a tough job. It's a tough quality to possess. I guess if there was a decision you made that today, if you could, and you want to do over again, what might that be? What kind of a lesson maybe did you learn from that?
I think about this sometimes, and I always go back to if I had the exact same information back then, would I have made the same decision? And the answer almost always comes out yes. Part of being a CEO or a leader is a lot of times you don't have perfect information or perfect data. You have to make decisions on the data you have, and you have to make the best decisions you can. Now, hindsight being 2020, yeah, I wish I could go back and say, hey, you know what? We shouldn't have bought private label mortgage-backed securities back in 2007 or whatever it is. That was kind of painful to unwind at that point in time. From if you're looking for a specific example, but in that moment in history, given all the facts at the time, can I say, did I make the wrong decision? Well, hindsight being 2020, yes, but at the moment, no. All right. If I had to do it again in the exact same situation, knowing what I knew then, probably would have made the same decision. So it's kind of hard to say on that end of it. So I don't really typically regret a lot of decisions. I'll look back at them and learn from them. One of the things you learn from that is, if you get an out-of-market coupon, well, there's probably something underlying within the investment that's not pretty good. So you should probably stay aware or at least do a little more research on it. But generally, I don't dwell on mistakes. And I've made my share, believe me. I sleep pretty well at night.
Well, I got one for you, Steve, and you've participated in a lot of leadership and CEO classes and courses with CUNA and Qs throughout your career. But what don't they tell you in CEO school that you just have to learn from experience?
Demands on your time. You are pulled in a lot of different directions. You're pulled in directions by your team, by the community. You've got your family to take into consideration. And believe it or not, you think, you know what, I'll volunteer and be in the community in this chamber or these social service organizations or that organization or whatever it is. And it doesn't seem like a lot, but it winds up being a lot. It takes a lot of time away from your family. You have to basically have a lot of people, or not a lot of people, but you have to have people within the office who you trust to pick up the slack for you because you're being pulled in so many different directions at that particular point in time. And you know what? You do need your family to be patient with you sometimes because part of the job, you are definitely pulled in a lot of different directions. There are a lot of people who want your time and energy and effort. And that's not something they really tell you. They give you all the things about vision, planning, all these other items and the latest things and where the industry trends are, but they don't really talk about the demands on your time. And there's a lot of demands on your time.
You are absolutely right, sir. Over the course of my time in credit unions, watching CEOs, sometimes I wonder how he or she does it, because it's like, and particularly if you have kids, you want to spend time with your kids, but then there's all these demands about you need to be here, you need to be there, or conferences. And you don't really maybe spend the kind of time that you would like to spend with family and loved ones. So it is really, really challenging. Let's transition this a little bit and look at the credit union industry as a whole. Given your time now as CEO, what in your view is the future of credit unions? What might you see as the biggest threats we face? And then on the other hand, what, in your opinion, is the strength of credit unions, and are we really tapping that strength the best that we can?
That's a good question. Once again, I think the credit industry will do well. I think there are going to be challenges, though, and there are going to be difficulties in time because things are changing very quickly. It's not so much anything you see and that's known. It's always the unknown. It's like what ride sharing did to the cab drivers industry. No one really saw it coming. It was like death from above. Those are the things that scare me more than anything else. Each credit union and how credit unions will survive will be different. We're very much a community-based institution. And while our technology is good, because you have to have really good technology because you have to be relevant in people's lives and that's what they expect, our brand is really out there shaking hands, talking to people, getting to know people, getting involved in the community, getting involved in organizations. Where does the community need help? Those types of things, and being very much grassroots. Other institutions, they have national scope. They have big fields of membership. They view it differently. They work it more through technology, or they work it through different items. I mean, it's different strokes for different for different folks on how the industry will play out. But there are a lot of smart people in the credit union industry, and that's why I think in the end it will be fine. But there are going to be challenges. What are they? Is AI a challenge or is it a benefit? You can make arguments for both. My concern is always the unknown. It's not really what's known. Everything that's out there is known. You can work with or around or figure out. It's the unknown that's always the thing that seems to get me the most. And I'm sorry, what was the second part of your question, Walter?
And the second part was, when you start looking at what our strengths are, what might they be? And are we really tapping it the way we should?
And once again, I think I briefly touched on this in my last comment, is there are some very talented people in this industry. You know, one of the nice things about being part of the trade association and being on the CCUA board is I've gotten to meet a lot of credit union leaders throughout the country, and they are very, very intelligent, very motivated, and they come from a place where they want to do good by people. And I think a lot of that is going to carry the industry forward.
Steve, let's take a break for this message from our sponsor, and then we'll come back for some final words. We'll be right back.
From the halls of NCUA to the front steps of your credit union, we're covering all the latest breaking news and opinions shaping and challenging the credit union industry like never before. Begin every day reading the CU Daily. Subscribe today.
Okay, and we're back with Steve White, CEO, President and CEO, I should say, of Westerly Community Credit Union in Westerly, Rhode Island. Steve, as we look to wrap up our conversation, if you were to give advice to a young credit union executive aspiring to one day become a CEO, what would that advice be?
To be decisive when you make your decisions. All right, get as much information as you can. Understand that you will never or very rarely have perfect information. Make the best decisions you can. Work with your team. Once again, be collaborative, take their input, work with them. If you have consensus, great. Sometimes you have to go out there on your own. There are times when I've gone, not often, against the team because I didn't think it was in the absolute best decision, but you need to be decisive and you need to move on. And once you've made that decision, you've got to have everyone pointed in the right direction and moving to support that decision on that. And it can't be, you know, wishy-washy halfway. And you'll make mistakes. And sometimes you'll just have to live with that and own up to them. And that's fine too. But be decisive, you know, get as much information as you can. Don't get stuck in analysis paralysis too, because I've seen that happen, and that can take a simple project and drag it out way longer than it needs to be. Get the relative information as best you can and make the best decisions you can, and be decisive in your decision. Don't waffle, because once you start waffling, the whole process starts falling apart.
And Steve, finally, as you look forward to enjoying retirement, what tops your bucket list of plans in retirement?
Well, I'm not just an office boy, okay? Just so you know, all right? I'm actually pretty good with my hands. I've got several projects around the house I want to work on, all right? And I want to get done. So that'll take me a while on that end. And, of course, my wife and I, we're going to do more traveling. And from there, we'll see. And I'm still going to be on at least 2 public service boards for a while on that end of it. I enjoy that. They both are very involved in helping people in the community, one especially for those people who are less fortunate and need a hand up. And I'll be working on that. And who knows, maybe I'll get a call someday. Someone's looking for an interim CEO while they're searching for the next CEO. And maybe I'll come out of retirement for a few months. Who knows? We'll see how that shakes itself out.
So you're going to be watching for the hand motion from the mound, right? To bring it back.
That's it. Hey, can you come in? You know, just for a couple innings? Perfect. You know.
There we go. Steve, thank you so much for taking time today to share, you know, what you've learned during your career as a CEO to help others as they look forward in their careers to maybe someday achieve the corner office like you did. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And just to any younger executives out there, it's a really rewarding industry. Stick with it. You do a lot of good for a lot of people.
Exactly.
All right. And Walter, thank you. Have a good day.
Thank you, Steve. And that kind of wraps up our program for today. Thank you so much for being with us here on the CU DailyCast. I'm Walt Lascos. Have a great day.